Well, there's
Okay, that's it.
a meal.
Johnny signed it. He signed it. He knows everything. I usually say John could never took a picture. He signed it, Johnny.
Yeah, she's here.
You can read them first if you want.
The little ones are growing, aren't they?
Well, I see that it's 12:30 and that's the time it was called for, and I don't see any other vehicles moving this way down the road, so I think it's time to start and welcome everybody to this time of tour and dedication, or rededication, whichever you prefer to call it. Marty is going to, here's how things are going to unfold. Marty is going to give us a tour of things that he thinks are important in connection with the restoration of the cemetery, and then we're going to end up at John A. Cornell's tombstone and have a brief time of rededication there. So, Marty?
All right, thank you. Thank you everybody for coming out today, and it's great that it's turned out so nice, and hopefully you won't get a sunburn today. Just wanted to take you through some of the work that's been going on here, and it's kind of hard to tell because it's a long process, and there's a lot of gravestones that have been down in the cemetery here, and when the ones go up, it's hard to see, but I'm going to point some of them out. And the folks from Sarnia who've been working on this have been doing a really amazing job. And I thought I'd start down here with this one that's under wraps. I'm not going to unveil it because it's under wraps just to protect it. Some of them need to be kept dry while they're being worked on. But a lot of the stones are being fixed in stages over a couple years. And this is the gravestone of William Willard, who's one of the original of the Willard family, who made quite a contribution to the church over the years. And just a few weeks ago, all you could see of this stone was this part here was lying flat, kind of sinking into the ground. And the Willard descendants have been very generous towards this project. And there's one fellow in Arizona who's been sending quite a bit of money for it, and so we thought we should get this one fixed up. And they got digging around and they found the base stone that you see here, and a good part of the monument itself was all underground. And this other little part here is probably part of his wife's stone, which some of it's probably still underground there. But anyway, it's gonna take a couple years to get that fixed up. But when they're done, it's going to look similar to what Reverend John A. Cornell, his stone looks like, which is what we're going to finish off with. So this is kind of well, it's not even before, it's the part way through of the process. But I just thought we'd kind of walk through a little loop through the cemetery and finish off at John A. Cornell's stone, and I'll point out a few of them that have been fixed up. A lot of the ones we started with were ones that are names that are in the memorial window at the back of the church, people who are part of the first congregation. But this summer, the city of Hamilton paid to have a bunch of the more dangerous stones fixed up, the really big ones that were in danger of falling over and possibly killing somebody. So I'll point out some of those as well. All right, so
Do you know the dates on this at all? Just roughly?
The Willards, this guy would have been born probably circa 1812,
okay,
and probably died in the 1880s.
Okay, thanks.
All right, so we're just going to head back here to the city had paid for the ones that are in several pieces. Basically, they're just sitting on top of each other like building blocks with a bit of mortar between them. And a lot of these ones, the mortar has all deteriorated, and so they're just sitting there held by gravity. And once they start tipping, it's only a matter of time before they just fall over in pieces. So this one's been all straightened up and remortared. How many of you remember Mr. Higginbotham?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We used to call him Mr. Higgy.
Higgy, yeah.
62.
Yeah, because I'm not sure how many.
Driven
They used to
around
come up to
is,
Sunday school once in a
Aaron
while.
Cornell. That one was completely down on the ground.
I'll tell you in a minute.
The
Oh, okay, I got that wrong.
stone was underground, and they found the pieces of it and put it back together again so it could hold the stone.
Who's this?
This is Reverend John A. Cornell's brother.
Cornell's brother.
Actually, I better look carefully because there's two of them with the same name. Anyway, there's two Aaron Cornells, but one is his nephew. But both of them are in the window at the back, so we thought we should get them.
Marty, would these stones mostly been limestone or something like that, or?
Yeah, it's a kind of a limestone, and so when they fix them, they use a limestone-based mortar that's specially made for doing this. That I've got in the museum right now because it needs to dry out. He finds some of them get so waterlogged from being in the ground that they just start to go to powder and disintegrate. But he says if you give them a season of drying out, then they're fine, and you get them up out of the ground, of course. So that's what's happening there. This is the family of John A. Cornell's brother Joseph, who lived at the end of Settlers Road. They were kind of the last of the Cornell family that had the name that were still in the area. I guess Herb Cornell. Some of you remember, maybe. Here, who you might get confused with the Reverend John A. Cornell. This was the grandson of the Reverend, and he's the one who wrote the book, The First Church of Beverly. He was a justice of the peace, and he lived where Joy White formerly lived.
Holy God, they got good. When was John A.
Named in the window at the back of the church. James, whose name is there, is buried in the Kirkwall Cemetery, but a lot of his descendants are here as well. And I won't make you maneuver around there, but there's a couple of stones that we're looking at the back of there that are two sipes that are in the window. And Henrietta Allen, she married Nelson Sipes, and all of you Cullum descendants are descended from those two. And they're also, from the Sipes family, who their grandfather was in the Butler's Rangers regiment of the British Army during the American Revolution, and that's how they ended up in this area. They had land given to them for being loyalists here, and when the War of 1812 started, they were living in Niagara and decided it was time to clear out and check out another spot, which was a good idea because that area got totally devastated. But anyway, they stayed here, and there's a lot of us are Sipes descendants.
Tell us about 1812. You said so everything was wiped out by the American troops, or what's the story?
Along the Niagara River, it was completely devastated.
Yeah.
A lot of, they burned Niagara on the lake right to the ground, and a lot of the homes and farms, and then they just totally plundered it and stripped it of anything valuable. When the Americans did take hold of it for a while and had to be driven back out, and the Sipes and probably a lot of other families moved out before the invasion happened, but some did stay there, like the Secord family, like the stories about Laura Secord. They were still trying to hold on there, but it was probably good to get out. Talking about, they had to do a lot of work on this one this summer, and it's, I don't know, there's at least 6 pieces to that one, and it had quite a lean to it, so now it's been nicely leveled and remortared. And Christopher Ricker and a bunch of his other descendants are buried here, and he'd made a lot of contributions to the Methodist Church in Sheffield. He bought the farm where John A. Cornell originally settled, which is where Sheffield was built. So he had the stone house in the middle of the village that some of you maybe know as the Wedham House or the Flag House or the Noonans. So that's he was kind of a gentleman farmer. He had a lot of land in the area, and he had a lot of children who kind of spread around the area. But he gave the land that the red brick church was built on, and he gave land for the Sheffield Stone School right next to it to be built on, and he was a very generous man. The original columns are buried there. There's a stone with a C on top of it, and William and Margaret were, well, actually they're one of the original Cullen families. William's parents came over with their children, and some of them were almost adults at the time, and some of them settled in Etobicoke and in the Oakville area, but 3 of the brothers came out here. One of them was William. They were all born in Wales, these brothers, and they settled just north of John Bayes Park, and his brother Henry settled on the farm next to it, and then there was a Thomas who settled in the 4th concession. But both William and Henry are listed on the windows, but that stone is in very good shape still, so it doesn't really need any work. But then his son John Cullum and his wife Emily Sipes are listed on the other side. This is a stone of Thomas Hilborn and some of his family, and they were connected with the Cornells that married in with them, and his name's listed in the window as well. This one is a several stage process to fix, and they're over the next couple of years going to get it back up again. I mean, get them back up again.
So that's how a lot of these would have looked, even though some of them were covered up, some of them were like that, just laying down.
Yeah, most of it, you would just have these 2 parts, and then those would still be underground. Like they snap off at ground level quite often.
Like this one.
Yeah, like, I mean, there's lots of them like where Gene's pointing. A lot of them are coming from that state and being dug up and put back together like a puzzle.
Marty, do they know who's really here in these ones?
I've got a transcription that the Ontario Genealogical Society did back in the 80s, and I'd have to look at it and see if they were able to read it at the time. That Dave Hall reenacted a few months ago.
Whereabouts?
And I didn't even realize he was buried here until I started looking up some of these ministers. And he lived at one time in the house where the Knights live now. And he was a very well-loved minister in Sheffield. He was United Brethren. And they kind of credit him with making the United Brethren more accepted in Sheffield when he came to town. Everybody really liked him. And as we said before, I guess they called him Daddy Plowman. He was a minister in the 1860s in Sheffield. And then you come over to this area here, which looks kind of empty, and it's always been speculated that there might have been a lot of cholera victims buried here in the 1830s, but nobody really knows for sure. This seems to be the older part of the cemetery. And it could just be that the stones have all sunk completely underground and are just kind of waiting under there. It's quite a project just fixing the stones that you can see, but if we did have money left over, then they might go hunting for some that are buried, but to do that in here would be quite the job. It would probably not going to tackle that.
So the cholera in 1830s, what percentage of the population would that have wiped out in this area? Is there any idea on that?
I've heard it estimated in Galt, and when they had it really bad there, but I can't remember the number. I mean, it would have been maybe as high as 20% of the population, but I'm not exactly sure. There is a family buried near John A. Cornell that their name is in the window. Their name's Rosenberger, and Roseville is named after this family because some of them stayed there. But there's 4 of them, the mother and father and 2 children, who all died in 1834 in August from the cholera, and they're all buried over there. So we'll just head out front and have a look at John A. Cornell's stone. A lot of these were leaning over and falling over, and there's still quite a bit more work to do. It's had a major improvement done.
Now, was this flat down before, Marty?
John A. Cornell's stone was snapped off in the middle, and but the rest of it was up. But it's been repaired at some time in the past. They made this concrete base for it because it had broken off at the bottom as well. They submerged part of his inscription. There's a verse on there that's half submerged in the concrete. But anyway, the rest of his information is there. And the restoration guys painted it with this limestone material here to make it look like when it was new. So that's kind of the full treatment that they do on things. This stone here is John A. Cornell's wife, his first wife, Huldah, and she was kind of overlooked for a long time because people thought his wife was Nancy Stouffer, but it turns out she wasn't his wife at all, and this is the real wife. So he did after Huldah died, he did marry a Nancy. Her name was Nancy Dennis, and had nothing to do with Nancy Stouffer. Nancy Stouffer married one of the Sipes that's buried back over there. So it's a little bit of confusion by a Cornell family genealogist. But anyway, there's a lot of John A. Cornell's family are buried here. He had a son who died in his teen years that's buried along here. I think one of his sisters and his daughters are buried along here, the Rosenbergers. So this is kind of a special spot for him. But anyway, I think you've all heard probably enough about the story of John A. Cornell. So sure. It says, in memory of the Reverend John A. Cornell, a native of the state of New York, he emigrated to Canada in 1801 and departed this life December 5th, 1859, in the 78th year of his age and the 47th of his ministry. It looks like it says the 17th of his ministry, but the 4 is just kind of worn out a bit there. It's really a 4. And it says, weep not for me, for here you see my trials have been great. And then I actually found out what the rest of it is, but I don't have it memorized. It's an old hymn. Sure.
I was just thinking, Marty, when you're talking about Huldah, Nancy, whatever. Remember the play we did was a church history, sort of. So, but when I was asked to come down here to be minister, I said, "Where's Sheffield?" And they said all roads lead to Sheffield. And I think that's probably true because last Sunday we had a brief 200th anniversary committee meeting after church, and I was just leaving, and this woman pulled up in front of the church, and so she came to talk to me, and she said, "Can you tell me where Sheffield Cemetery is?" So that engendered further conversation, and she was from Neepawa, Manitoba, and she wanted to come here to see if any of her ancestors were buried here. Whereupon I took her into the church and I showed her some other stuff, and she wants copies of Marty's book and so on. But the name was Bryden, was the ancestral name. I don't know if that means anything to anybody. It meant something to a couple of the people at the board meeting. But so the roots may start here, but then the branches spread quite a far afield. I want to do a little bit of a rededication. First, I selected these words from the 90th Psalm. Yeah, come on in closer. Then I won't have to contend with airplanes or wherever you can hear is the place to be.
I thought I'd hear better.
Sorry. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn us back to dust and say, "Turn back, you mortals." For 1,000 years in your sight are like yesterday when it is past, or like a watch in the night. You sweep them away, and they are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and it is renewed, in the evening it fades and withers. Let your work be manifest to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and prosper for us the work of our hands. Oh, prosper the work of our hands. When the 200th Anniversary Committee was formed and first met to plan the 200th year, it was decided that a special project for the anniversary would be undertaken, and that would be to contribute whatever was possible to the restoration of this Sheffield Cemetery. And as you can see from the tour that Marty has just given us, quite a bit has been accomplished already, including, of course, the restoration of John A. Cornell's tombstone. We are pleased to know that some $18,000 has been contributed to this project to date, and thank the individuals and corporations and organizations who have made these contributions. This afternoon we are here to rededicate this work, to dedicate the work undertaken, to remember the history that this place represents, and as we do, to remember the legacy that John A. Cornell and of course others who followed him left in this community. I'd like to precede our dedication with a poem called We Remember Them. Every other line has the refrain that is that title, We Remember Them, and I ask you to repeat that together, every other line. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them. In the bowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick of heart, we remember them. When we have joys and special celebrations we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are part of us. We remember them. Let us pray. With hearts grateful for all who have come and gone before us, and in whose final resting place we stand this afternoon, we give you thanks, O God, for the rich history contained herein and for the mark they made upon this community. We give you thanks, O God. May we also in our time bear further fruit of what has been left to us, doing all that we do in faith, in hope, and in love. Amen. We hereby dedicate the work of this 200th anniversary project and commit to the glory of God the restoration of Sheffield Cemetery. As in all days past, may the favor of the Lord our God be upon us and prosper for us the work of our hands. When we leave this place, go in peace, and may the grace of God go with us all. Amen.
Just John is in the musical. He never was paid for being a minister, and he kept farming the whole time.
Shameful practice.
Sort of.
So he farmed right up until the end of his life. He still had a few farm animals, and the census shows him growing a few crops. But he ran the post office. He got the post office for Sheffield. He was involved in building what's now Highway 8. He kind of acted as a doctor and lawyer for people who needed it in the early days. He was involved in founding the Sheffield School, and he was married and had a bunch of children as well.
Sorry.
No pressure.
Go ahead. Well, this was kind of secondary, though. We want to thank Marty for all the work he's
Yes.
done before and today.
Well, thank you for all the support with this, and the musical has contributed a lot towards the project and people's donations, and it's come together better than I had hoped for, really.